It was a late October evening. My friend Kamal had invited me over for a small get-together. By the time the event finally wrapped up, it was well past midnight. As I was getting ready to leave, Kamal walked me out. He asked which route I was planning to take home. I told him I was taking the bypass to get home faster. There was a stretch on that route that cut straight through the woods, a section most people prefer to avoid at night. Kamal went completely quiet for a second. He looked straight at me, entirely serious. He told me that if I was going that way, I shouldn't stop for anything on the road. No matter what I saw, I shouldn't stop because no one out there actually needs help. I just laughed it off. I told him not to worry. All those creepy roadside stories were just fiction anyway. Then I twisted the throttle and left. On my way, I hit the gravel stretch. The headlight cut a dim, unstable line through the pitch black. Every street lamp was now kilometers behind me. The forest on either side felt heavy and suffocating. The steady thrum of the engine was the only comforting sound left. Then it just stopped. There was no splutter and no warning. The engine died. The silence that rushed in was immediate. My momentum carried me a few more meters, the tires crunching on the loose stones, before I finally skidded to a halt. In that same second, the headlight flickered and went completely dark. The road plunged into absolute black. My heart hammered against my ribs with a sudden, sharp percussion. I immediately tried the electric start. Nothing happened. I tried again, pressing the button harder, as if that would help. I told myself not to panic. Panic is useless. I switched to the kickstart. I jammed my foot down hard once, twice. The metal lever offered solid resistance, but the engine didn't catch. The sound of my own ragged breathing seemed impossibly loud in the quiet. I knew this stretch of road. It was just farmland and dense patches of trees for another 20 minutes. On my fifth desperate kick, I paused. My leg was trembling slightly. A low crackle sounded from the undergrowth to my left. It wasn't the sound of small, skittering prey. This was the deliberate snapping of dry branches. I froze. My gaze snapped to the source. 30 feet away, a dog emerged slowly from the tree line. It was large, far bigger than the street dogs you usually see out here. But it felt like it was starving, way too skeletal. Its coat was matted and caked in mud. It stopped at the edge of the road, silhouetted against the slightly lighter sky, and looked directly at me. Its eyes were not the shining points of light you usually see on animals at night. They were wide and fixed on me. They reflected the minimal ambient light in a way that felt wrong. They looked like cold, pale discs that didn't blink. The dog didn't growl or bark. It just observed. A primal spike of terror drove through me. My logic was instantly overridden by something older and much colder. I couldn't convince myself it was just a hungry stray. That stare was calculating. I needed to start the scooter right now. I began to kick the lever again and abandoned the clicking electric starter. The metal mechanism groaned but refused to turn over. I was sweating now, despite the night chill. The acrid scent of unburned gasoline mixed with the damp earth smell of the woods. It wasn't moving closer. Instead, it slowly and deliberately began to change its posture. It shifted its weight backward, its powerful haunches bunching. My mind refused to process what I was seeing at first. It was like watching a film reel play in slow motion. The dog's front paws lifted off the ground. It didn't leap, it rose. One agonizing inch after another, it straightened its spine. It stood fully erect on its back legs. It balanced in a way that defied all canine anatomy. Its front paws dangled at its chest, useless and limp. The rest of its body was locked into a grotesque, upright stance. Fully upright, it was taller than I was. It still hadn't made a sound. It stood there like a vertical nightmare against the dark pines, its unblinking stare locking onto mine. Every cell in my body screamed at me to run. My strongest instinct urged me to drop the scooter and flee into the dark. I fought it with everything I had. If you run, you are prey. That phrase echoed in my mind. predatory animals chase what flees. My only defense was to not look like food. I was paralyzed by the internal war. My muscles were coiled tight, ready to burst into a sprint, while my brain clamped down on the signal to stay still. I didn't move. My hands were clamped onto the handlebars with white knuckles. The scooter was between us, a pitiful piece of junk that felt like my only shelter. I forced myself to stare right back at those pale discs. I tried to show no fear, though my breath came in short, choked gasps. 30 seconds felt like an hour. We were locked in a silent standoff. I needed help. My shaking hand slowly crept into my pocket. I pulled out my phone without breaking eye contact. I thumbed the screen. Emergency calls only. 0 bars. The signal grid was completely blank. I shoved the useless phone back into my pocket. No one was coming to save me. I was entirely on my own. I had to depend on whatever details I could pick out through the dim moonlight. The clouds overhead shifted slightly. A stark, unobstructed beam of silver light poured down onto the road, illuminating the creature completely. In that sudden clarity, the details became painfully sharp. The cold moonlight caught the ragged texture of its matted fur. It illuminated the unnatural angles of its joints. The thing flinched slightly. Its pale, unblinking eyes squinted against the sudden brightness of the clearing. It clearly didn't like being fully exposed. Seeing that tiny break in its absolute stillness shattered my paralysis. The will to fight back surged. I stood my ground behind the handlebars. I made my frame look as large as possible in the silver light. I raised my hands and let out a harsh, aggressive shout. I threw all my terror into a loud warning sound to show it I wasn't backing down. The dog hesitated. It shifted its balance, looking unsure for the first time. The human-like quality of its upright posture seemed less like a hunter now, and more like something unnatural caught in the open. It took a hesitant step backward. Its bipedal movement was awkward and clumsy on the uneven dirt. It backed away slowly and carefully, never lowering its head. The tall, thin silhouette continued to recede. Step by step, it left the gravel and melted back into the dense, black shadows of the pines. Within 30 seconds, it was gone. The only things left under the quiet moonlight were the empty pine trunks and the swaying branches. The silence returned, thick and heavy. I stared at the blank space between the pines where the thing had just vanished. My chest heaved, the adrenaline still electric in my veins. "Hey, Pragyan?" The voice cut through the dark. I froze. It sounded exactly like Kamal. The pitch, the familiar cadence, the way he said my name. It was uncanny. The sound came directly from the dense thicket where the dog had just retreated. My mouth opened. The instinct to call back almost took over. I wanted to ask what he was doing out here, or how he had caught up to me so fast. The words were right on the tip of my tongue, but I stopped. The cold weight in my stomach dropped even lower. He couldn't have gotten ahead of me on foot, not through a dense forest. Whatever was in those trees was mimicking him. He was trying to get me to talk, trying to draw me closer. A cold sweat broke out across my neck. I grabbed the handlebars and lifted my foot over the kickstart. I didn't care about the noise anymore. I slammed my weight down on the lever. The metal resisted. Nothing. I kicked it again, harder, putting every ounce of panic into the movement. The lever struck down. The engine sputtered with a brief gasp of life, then died. From the trees, the voice called out again, slightly louder. The tone remained flat, lacking any real human emotion. "Pragyan, wait up." I ignored the absolute terror freezing my limbs and kicked the lever a third time with a desperate, violent force. The engine caught. The sudden, loud roar of the exhaust shattered the quiet. The yellow headlight flickered back to life, cutting a path through the dark road. I quickly swung my leg over the seat, ready to twist the throttle. But before I could pull away, a heavy, chaotic crashing sound erupted from the undergrowth. Something massive was tearing through the bushes at an impossible speed. It broke branches as it hurtled straight toward me. Panic completely seized my brain. I didn't even think. My hands yanked the helmet off the handlebars. I hurled it with all my strength into the darkness, straight toward the crashing sound. I didn't wait to see if it hit. I gripped the throttle and twisted it all the way back, forcing the scooter forward at full speed. The tires skidded violently on the loose gravel before catching grip. As I shot forward, the heavy, rhythmic thudding of footsteps rose above the engine noise. Whatever it was, it had reached the road. It was running behind me on two legs. The sound of its pursuit stayed right on my tail. Every time I glanced in the vibrating side mirrors, the shadows seemed to warp. The heavy footfalls echoed right behind the rear tire. I kept the throttle pinned to the absolute limit. The scooter rattled violently over the uneven road. I leaned forward, praying the engine wouldn't cut out again. For 200 agonizing meters, the heavy panting and slamming footsteps tracked me through the dark. Then, up ahead, the pitch-black road finally gave way to a harsh, beautiful glow. The forest line broke, opening up onto the wide paved lanes of the main highway under yellow street lamps. The moment the scooter crossed into the bright orange light of the first street lamp, the heavy footsteps behind me suddenly stopped. They cut off with a sharp skid on the dirt. I didn't slow down. I kept the throttle wide open and flew onto the empty highway under the safety of the lights, leaving the dark stretch of woods completely behind. I have always been a complete skeptic. Before that night, I was the first person to call out anything paranormal as fake. Ghost stories, cryptic encounters, urban legends, I always thought they were just stories made up for fun or a cheap scare. I relied entirely on logic and facts. But seeing that thing stand up, hearing it twist Kamal's voice into something hollow, and feeling the sheer speed of it chasing me down that dark road changed everything. There are things out there in the dark that defy any logical explanation, and I had to learn that the hard way. If you enjoyed hearing about my experience and want to hear more encounters like this, please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think happened out there in the woods by leaving a comment down below. I'll be reading through your feedback.